Hello! The cocky trickster Max and the modest intellectual Albert subject their bodies to freezing in the name of science and fame. But during the experiment, a catastrophe occurs on Earth that takes the lives of all other men, and their pod is forgotten for many years. Waking up in a new world, Max and Albert are faced with a heroic mission to survive and become fathers to a new generation of boys. But they do not yet know that all the women of the future are not eager to help them at all. A black car with several important passengers emerges from a helicopter. The elderly man in a wheelchair is Professor Victor Kupelweiser, who has flown to the conference to announce the beginnings of a monumental experiment, the freezing of 2 volunteers, who will wake up in 3 years in 1994. Meanwhile, these 2 gentlemen, Albert and Maximilian, witness a bad omen. A mirror suddenly shatters in front of their faces in the toilet. On television, the volunteers are watched by their relatives. Biologist Albert is celebrated as a pioneer, while Max seems to have abandoned his young daughter and wife and simply escaped his responsibilities. Although the defrosting experiment was successful on the chimpanzees, Kupelweiser warns that the effects on the psyche would be unpredictable and the subjects might experience hallucinations upon awakening. As preparations for hibernation are underway, Max sneaks a flask of alcohol and a couple of cigarettes into the pod with him. The men wake up in a dark room with figures in white hovering over them. Upon awakening, they find themselves in a different room, reminiscent of a hospital ward. Both complain that they are sweating profusely because of the defrosting. The first visitors enter.
Jaka miła obsługa.
Śniadanko. Dziękuję bardzo.
After eating the bland food, the men learn from similarly emotionally bland ladies that this is a special adaptation diet. Max solves the problem in his own way and pulls out his stash. The timid Albert also agrees to smoke. The guards quickly find out that cigarettes are a toy for getting intoxicated.
No bo się pan najadł tego różowego.
Mogą zapruszyć ogień.
The firemen burst into the room and cover the men with foam from head to toe. After shaking themselves off, the men try to find out what's even going on by asking Dr. Lamia, who has been put in charge of supervision. But she has heard nothing of Kupelweiser and explains that there were more important problems during the war than 2 frozen men. The director appears and informs them that it was men who started the war, and none of them survived.
Dawno wyginęli.
Wyginęli? Przecież to nie były mamuty.
Okazuje się, że tak.
The women managed to survive thanks to the League of Women organization, which eventually became a full-fledged state. Upon learning also that they woke up 50 years later, as late as 2044, Max demands to be paid for overtime. The men don't believe this nonsense and decide that these stories and windowless chambers are just the hallucinations the professor warned them about. They try to leave, but the locked door zaps them. Both cannot believe what has happened and are perplexed as to how women reproduce without men.
Kobieta zawsze dawała początek życiu.
No, ale myśmy wam tym trochę pomagali.
Lamia, who's eavesdropping on our ward's conversation, explains that they use parthenogenesis, artificial self-fertilization, a genetic advance that allows women to reproduce without male genes. Biologist Albert confirms that this is possible. Lamia interrupts their conversation by turning off the lights to the protests of Max. An acquaintance of Lamia's, Tekla, from the genetics department arrives and tries to bribe the warden with a delicacy, an actual jar of jam. She investigates about the Archeo department's secret plans and their find, hinting that her department is also interested in studying males. In the morning, the men are awakened by the loud anthem of the League of Women, and Max checks the cameras for hidden passages and holes, but to no avail. The TV shows babies born from test tubes. Lamia's boss warns of the danger posed by men and orders her to limit her contact with them. The girl replies that they are not aggressive, although the short one is a bad influence on the tall one. At night, the men lie down on the same bed because of the cold from the air conditioner, and Max sees that Albert has gotten completely frustrated. He says that they've lost everything at once: friends, family, and children.
Przecież ja w 98 miałem dostać mieszkanie.
They have a Bruderschaft drink together, and it calms the weeping Albert down just a bit. In the morning, Max watches the broadcast of a new sports match between the Archeo and the Genetics teams, at the end of which the girls exchange jerseys, which the man is very fond of. Albert is still moping about his old life and is not interested in women's bodies.
Przecież to może być dla nas raj. No raj.
The optimistic Max is already making plans for the future, and in order not to create competition, asks his irritated friend who he prefers, blondes or brunettes. In comes Lamia, whom Max tries to seduce by touching her skin and kissing her, but she cuts the attempts off with a wrestling move. Max is surprised by the girl's strength. However, The new sensations overwhelm Lamia and prove stronger than the pills that all girls must take on a regular schedule. The drug transforms sexual attraction into passion for one's career, and the genetics agents intervene again. Short-haired brunette Emma Dax is sent to monitor the men and scolds Lamia for her careless treatment of the males. In response, she receives pokes and threats from the blonde. The two girls accompany Albert and Max to a meeting with Her Excellency, the head of the League of Women. On their way out of the cell, they are given beacons in the shape of earrings. The stern older woman surrounds herself with a more natural interior than in the other compartments. The screen shows a forest, and there's an apple tree in the hall. The men eat 2 apples, which turn out to be sacred, and for attempting to approach Her Excellency, Maximilian is once again given a whack. The men plan their escape. Lamia is still unable to calm down from the rush of feelings for Max and goes to the local nursing home, where old ladies who still remember the world before the war live in the new society. They have been isolated and kept in harsh conditions so that they don't destroy the common ideology with their stories. Lamia asks the guards to visit the oldest woman and meets Julia Novak. She is carefully monitored, so Lamia providently creates a disturbance for the cameras to talk privately. She gives the old woman jam and says she wants to learn more about men.
Do czego oni byli potrzebni?
Do rozrywki, to jest w pewnym sensie.
Julia realizes that Lamia has fallen in love and asks what they are going to do with the 2 aliens from the past next. It turns out that they are going to be naturalized, that is, subjected to gender reassignment surgery. The old woman claims that this is worse than death for men, and if she were younger, she would do anything to save them. Meanwhile, Max and Albert find a fragile wire in the ceiling and de-energize the compartment, escaping from the guards in the dark. They make their way through the tunnels and see the girls in class being told about the horrors men did to women before the League was created and how they could be protected from them. The fugitives don't manage to get far and are sent back to their cells. The men are notified that if they don't agree to the sex change, their fate will be decided by the tribunal that opens right over their heads. They do not recognize this kind of authority, but there is nowhere for them to run. A debate ensues in which the men are compared to a disease, without which the world is a better place. And it turns out that history was long ago rewritten to fit the new ideology. Einstein and Copernicus were women, and Cain killed not his brother, but his sister.
Piękna! Likwidując męską połowę świata, zlikwidowałyście tym samym połowę...
Albert tries to appeal to reason, and Max adds that they simply haven't had a man in a long time, which only causes confusion. The guards take the men away, and during the vote, Archeo and Genetics get into an argument between elimination and naturalization. The latter option wins, but the men run away again. Max's kisses make the guards faint, and a fault in the wiring causes a fire. After lingering on the pool floor for a while, the fugitives blend in with a crowd of unsuspecting women. After passing through a baby breeding incubator, they descend into the mines, where they see a gathering of decadent women, an illegal retro party with jazz music. Police, who track the men down by their earring beacons, swoop down on the crowd of female delinquents, but they put up a fierce resistance. During the fight, objects, cakes, and fists fly at the police, and Albert and Max get lost in the chaos. Afterwards, they find each other, but bump into Lamia in the elevator.
Zaprowadzę was do wyjścia. Ja wam naprawdę dobrze życzę.
Albert convinces his friend to trust the girl, and the trio ascends to the highest level, where the periscope is installed. It turns out that they have been underground, and the surface is uninhabitable due to the destruction and radiation. Lamia claims that naturalization is the only way out, but the men declare that they still intend to go to the surface in spacesuits, and then it becomes clear that the girl has lured them into an ambush. Lamia is then informed that her work on the research of males is taken away from her, and the case is given to Genetics. Tired of running away, the men are put on the operating table to become organ donors, and the elderly surgeon turns out to be Max's daughter.
Nigdy nie miałam, ponieważ wolałam się dać zahibernować niż zostać ze mną I z mamusią.
She also informs them that the male organs unsuitable for transplantation can be used to prepare protein mass, that is, to be consumed as food. Lamia, disguised as a nurse, infiltrates the operating room and saves her subjects. She gets rid of their tracking earrings and provides them with spacesuits. And then, fleeing the chase, she herself ascends with them into the war-torn desert. To their surprise, Max discovers that the lifeless landscape was only a scenery through which they could reach the seashore. Emma Dax, in the last remaining spacesuit, follows in the trail of the fugitives. The joyful travelers continue on and find a forest, but they begin to run out of oxygen. Max notices a flying stork and realizes that they don't need spacesuits at all. Not far away, they find someone's well-maintained house. They are enjoying food and rest when Emma catches up with them.
Ręce do góry, Ekscelenc.
the girl loses consciousness, and Albert rushes to free her from the suffocating suit and resuscitate her.
Ja tylko niosę pomoc.
Dobra,
Emma comes to her senses, still trying to resist her new reality, when suddenly, a local news report begins, announcing that Emma and Lamia have died bravely carrying out their mission, and that the men have been successfully naturalized. The two girls put in their police report that they're feeling fine.
Dlaczego one tak kłamią?
Dla wyższej idei.
Przecież to jest wstrętne.
Po co miałby niepokoić?
This becomes the last straw, and Albert helps his new acquaintance get rid of the spacesuit. Max also gets a little privacy with Lamia on the second floor. While the girls are discussing their new experience, Her Excellency, who knows perfectly well that the surface of the Earth is quite habitable, but keeps it secret from her subordinates, arrives right at the house in an elevator. The men try to capture her and, in the course of the struggle, it turns out that it was a man hiding in the disguise of a woman. After the war, he turned out to be the only boy his loving mother was able to save from naturalization by passing him off as a girl. And then he rose through the ranks and was elected head of the League. He didn't dare to change anything on his own, and also took pills that made him feel no attraction. Together, they decide to bring back the old world, and using their seed to give life to a new generation of boys. Max and Albert sneak into the incubator and add their biomaterial to the test tubes. Time passes, and the shocked employees discover newborn boys in front of them for the first time in half a century. As always, look for the name of the movie in the description of the video. In the meantime, let us know in the comments. Do you think it's possible to have a world where only one of the sexes lives? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video so more awesome stories come out as often as possible.